Hi, my name's Dustin Atwood. I have been a professional technician and ASE Master Certified for probably about 3 decades. Always like to start off the shows with at least a little background. Most of you out there that probably watch our podcast know my background probably better than I do at this point. But in case you're new to the channel, I wanted to kind of at least let you know who you're talking to. This week, I want to talk about buying used cars, specifically maybe buying vehicles off of Marketplace. I don't know if anybody uses Craigslist anymore, or maybe just your neighbor, and how to go about the process or how I go about the process. And it may not just be vehicles, it may be, farm equipment, it may be, generators or any kind of stuff that's going to be mechanical in nature. I know a lot of people buy things secondhand, but if it's a used clothing item or a used piece of furniture for the house, I'd say there's a little bit less unknown risk there than if you buy something mechanical. So you spend a lot of money typically on mechanical things, and you can get some great deals out there, and you can also kind of go about the negotiation process. Now, I'm not a big person that negotiates price with people. Typically, if I tell you it's this amount of money, that's what I want for it. And if you don't want to pay me that amount of money for it, that's totally fine. Don't buy it. I'm fine not selling it. But I also realize there's folks out there that are very motivated sellers, and sometimes there is some room on it. And there's also people that like to negotiate or dicker on a price. And there is a way to go about it without being offensive. And I'm just going to give you my thoughts on this today. So if you're in the market for a used vehicle, you really need to do your homework on it. If it's a used piece of equipment, here on the channel, you've seen, and I'll just share one of my impulse buys, I guess, if you will. During COVID, I had two gas-powered skid steers. One was mine, one was a good buddy of mine. And so we got together, and I don't really loan equipment out because every time I do, it's torn up. But this particular buddy of mine, him and I pretty much just go back and forth like it's ours, if you will. And so I had a skid steer, he had a skid steer. It's like, why do we have two skid steers? Why don't we sell them both and we'll get, one decent piece of equipment? So we ended up doing that. And then all of a sudden I had this like FOMO, fear of missing out, that I didn't have a skid steer to use, which is ridiculous. And so I bought the Gale skid steer that you see here on the channel. Now I'm going to talk about a couple of red flags that happened to me during that. I think it was about 4 hours away, kind of northwest of me into Kansas. And I drive into Kansas a lot to pick up different things. For me, it's cheaper buying items in Kansas for whatever reason, probably because people don't want to drive that far to get them. And so a lot of times I'll get a deal, but I have to travel for the deal. So there's kind of tip number one, I guess, if you will. If you're looking for a deal, open up your area that you're looking for the deal. I know like on Marketplace, usually it's like 100 miles and you can shift the center point. Now, the second part of that is we're in kind of southwestern Missouri, and I bought northeastern and northwestern vehicles, and really from about our latitude and south, there's almost like a 10-year difference of the quality of the vehicles or the equipment in this instance. And I really try and shift where I'm buying vehicles south of me. And so I had to learn this kind of the hard way. I would go to Kansas City or I'd go to St. Louis, and I would see a significant more amount of rust and corrosion than I would if I went, say into Oklahoma or even, southwestern Kansas. The vehicles and the equipment were just in better shape. For me, there's that corridor, probably about 100 miles north of us, and they just seem to get a lot more snow, so there's going to be a lot more brine, salt, road treatment that those vehicles are going to see. We're here in Springfield, we'll get snow in the morning, and it'll warm up, and it'll be gone before I go home from work. And so huge differential. So if I am looking for a vehicle and it's up north, and I say north not as like, Minnesota or something, if it's north of me more than about an hour, maybe two, I'm going to take that in consideration, and I'm going to want to pay less for it, or maybe I'm not going to want to do it at all. So when you buy a rust or corroded vehicle, you're inherently going to have more issues, and the cost of ownership and the life expectancy of that car, truck, van, piece of equipment is much less. But I digress. Getting back to the Gale skid steer. So I found this Gale skid steer. I messaged back and forth. It was pretty much what I was looking for. I was looking for roughly a 65 horse machine. I really would like to get into a tracked unit, but the budget on a tracked unit is typically a third to two-thirds more than a wheeled unit. And so I really didn't have that budget for what, we were looking for. But going from a gas to a diesel skid steer and going from 1,200 pound lift capacity to 2,000 really fit the role of that skid steer much better for me. So I'm like, hey, Gale sounds, I've never owned a Gale piece of equipment. I've never worked on one. It's an air-cooled Deutz diesel, which is a very neat setup, by the way. I am familiar with Deutz a little bit. I've done some work, so I at least understood some of it. And I thought the rest of it, it's a mechanical piece of equipment. I'll figure it out, which I have. And there's been many videos here on the channel about it. But red flag number one, and I've had this happen 2 times out of all the stuff I've bought over the years, and both times it was a red flag, and I didn't understand it until later. The seller lowered the price pretty significantly when and after I told them I would pay what it is they wanted to it. I bought a 98 F-150 one time, which is still in service. My mom actually drives it. Been a very good, loyal truck for probably getting close to 12 to 15 years now. And I had that gentleman, when I paid him, he gave me $100 back cash. And I remembered thinking, well, that's weird. I've already agreed. I did my part, paid your asking price, and you gave me some money back. Well, later I understood that it's because it had a plethora of problems, and it was actually at a shop, and he was selling it from wherever that shop was. It was in Mount Vernon across from the new TA fuel station there. But that was a red flag. And later, as I put a clutch, a rear end, complete new front end under it, new brakes all the way around it, new tires. Now, I knew a lot of that was an issue, but I didn't really know that it was quite that big of a deal. So I pretty much mechanically overhauled that truck. But we have driven it so long now, and it's been such a faithful servant without a ton of, crazy repairs after the initial amount of crazy repairs. That's a red flag number one. Back to the skid steer, he told me he would deliver it, and I really didn't have time in order to drive up there, inspect it, and get it. So I made a commitment and bought it sight unseen. Now, there were some photos, and we had messaged back and forth, and he represented it as a good piece of equipment. It really wasn't. I've put a bunch of money in that, and I still need to put a bunch more money in that. And that's really just the cost of an impulse purchase. And so that's the second part of it. If you're going to buy it sight unseen, it needs to be a really good deal. And I'm talking about, like, if you had to scrap the vehicle or scrap the piece of equipment, that's how much you paid for it. That way your risk isn't super high. And I don't remember on this Gale skid steer if he wanted $13,000 and I gave him $12,500, or if he wanted $12,500 and I ended up giving him $12,000. It was one or the other. But when you're dealing with that kind of money, you need to kind of understand that, hey, just because I want it doesn't mean that that's the best decision. And I have paid for both of those decisions and had to see them through when I probably could have saved my money and bought a machine that was more worth what I gave for it. Now, I've had that Gale skid steer several years now. We've put drive motor, we put one drive motor, and I need to do the other. it's getting ready to go back in the shop again. It seems like every winter I kind of put it in the shop and I give it a big overhaul or give it a bunch of work. And we use it, and we've used it very faithfully, and it's made me quite a bit of money back on it. So it kind of offset it. But if I didn't have the skill set that I have, and you were just, Joe Schmo out there trying to do his landscaping or just a piece of equipment, it would bankrupt you in a hurry. And I don't want you guys to be in that space. And the internet is valuable out there, but you need to kind of take it with a grain of salt. And that's part of the reason I started putting content out here on YouTube is I'm doing this all the time regardless. It's not like I do all these projects just to have content for YouTube. Maybe someday I'll build the channel big enough and it'll, really go kind of crazy. I've seen creators out there that like they're making decisions and purchases that are strictly for content for YouTube. What you guys see here on the channel is stuff I'm doing regardless of whether we film it or not. But I thought it was enough that maybe if I shared it with some folks, there would be information that would help them. Or when I do dumb things, maybe that would prevent somebody out there from doing the same thing, or at least learning from, the way I did it and, kind of zigging when I zagged. But when you're buying mechanical things, you're taking a big risk. Even if you're buying it new under warranty, that warranty is only going to last so long. Most of the stuff I buy are things that people have kind of given up on, mainly because I can get it for a deal, and the skill set that I have, I can rehab it and either use it or put it back out there in the world in better shape than when I bought it. And when you're going through that, knowing the history of it or possibly buying it from somebody would be a good decision, in my opinion. Yes, that can burn you, and that's really a reason why I don't sell things to the general public from A1 Custom Car Care or from, whatever. It's not like I have a lot that I'm trying to sell things out there, because sometimes, it will have an issue, and, I want to make sure that I'm rehabbing it and working it through my system before I put it back out there for sale. So a lot of times, for instance, I'll give you a couple right now. You've seen the videos where we have been rebuilding my son's Dodge Dakota, which he's back driving by now, and it seems to be doing very well. And that was a big wreck, collision, whatever you want to call it, that we had brought it back from. I mean, we took it to the frame shop, etc. But his loaner vehicle is actually a vehicle that I've taken care of for many years. It's an 02 Chevy Trailblazer. My mom had driven it for probably 10 years, and she recently, which congratulations, went and bought her first brand new vehicle. She bought I think it's probably a 2025 F-150 with a 2.7 four-wheel drive EcoBoost in it. So congratulations, Mom, if you happen to see this video. But my son Jonas, I had bought the Trailblazer from her, and I had him driving it, so I had time, or we had time, to work on his Dodge Dakota. And whether I keep the Trailblazer as a loaner vehicle or I sell it, now we've had it in our custody long enough that I've had to do some repairs to it. I'm going to do some this weekend, actually. But if and when I decide to sell that to somebody, we've had it long enough that I know I've worked out a lot of the bugs, and it had been very well taken care of while my mom drove it for the last decade, that even though it's got like 317,000 miles on it, and that may not be worth anything to anybody out there, but this is a pretty doggone good running and dependable vehicle. When I do decide to sell it out there, I've owned it long enough, we've driven it and run it through its paces, that when I sell it to somebody, I don't really have to worry about it. Things are going to happen. It's an older vehicle. It's not new, and it does not come with a factory warranty. But you're paying, a very small amount of money for a vehicle that's going to get you to point A to point B as long as you take care of it. And for a lot of folks out there, that's what they're looking for on Marketplace, on, like I said, Craigslist. I don't know if that's even a viable option anymore, or just word of mouth. So those are all viable ways to look at a vehicle. Now, when I have somebody that is either customer, friend, client to the store, whatever you want to, whatever puts you in my realm of talking with you about your vehicle needs, I usually will look through 6 to 10 vehicles for somebody before I give it my blessing, and say, hey, this is a good vehicle. And the reason that I'm so picky on that is because once you pay for the vehicle, you're now saddled to whatever the expense, cost, downtime is for that vehicle for, the next 3 to 6 years. That's really about the minimum I think somebody should get out of a vehicle. I personally want to drive a vehicle or own a vehicle that is part of our normal standard fleet. I'm not talking about one I fixed and one we've driven a little bit and we put out. Like our core vehicles that I rely on for our family, 10 years. That's the minimum that I really want to drive a vehicle, is usually 10 years. At that point in time, you have moved away from depreciation and it has started to appreciate, even in the used market. And a lot of times we will drive those vehicles and I will have the cost and downtime of expense for 10 years. And most of the time that vehicle's worth somewhere of what I paid for it 10 years ago. That doesn't mean I get all my money back that I spent on it, keeping it up. That's the cost of ownership. But I can a lot of times break even on it and get my money back and move that into another vehicle that suits my needs better than that vehicle did. For instance, and I talk about the capabilities of vehicles quite often. Sometimes when fuel prices go crazy, which we've seen, they're doing decent here in the end of 2025, you will see vehicles that are heavy tow monsters. The price of those vehicles will go down to hardly nothing. I remember this especially in like 08 to 2010. You could get like a Ford Excursion for like $3,500, which is crazy. You could get a 454 dually full drive Chevy for $3,500. And it was because the capabilities that people needed right then were not the tow monster side of things, they were fuel economy. The adverse was true as well. If you had a Geo Metro, people were falling over themselves to get 40 miles to the gallon because that's what it took. So depending on what is going on in your life will depend on what you need. And so sometimes that's where you'll trade vehicles off. Maybe you have more kids. Maybe you got married and you have different older, younger, whatever the case may be, and you need different things than what your old vehicle could provide. What I want with that old vehicle is I want it in as good, if not better shape, that when I sell it, it can be a stepping stone to your next new vehicle or solve some of the capability issues that you're having, whether it's number of occupants, whether it's towing capacity, fuel economy, fill in the blank for whatever fits you. And so when you're looking for those vehicles, if what you have has been taken care of, you can incrementally step up without having a full investment. And that's one of the biggest things that I see all the time is we have gone to a disposable world that this phone, because I didn't take care of it, the screen's all broke, etc., isn't worth anything when I go to trade it in. And so I'm constantly making payments on things. As adversely is if I take care of this and I go back to the phone company, they're going to give me $1,000 towards my next phone or $500 or whatever it is. In my mind, I want vehicles to do the same thing. I don't want to lose that money. I want to tie that money up in my old vehicle and put it towards my new vehicle. Or maybe what my wife and I did when we bought our home, we've had car payments over the years, but we both drive nice vehicles. They're paid off. They are all high mileage at this point in time. But we needed a tractor. And so instead of having to get another car payment and being on this just proverbial hamster wheel of payments for cars, we took, and I think it was a 5 or 7 year loan and we financed a Mahindra tractor. Now we paid that off over that time. I did get another truck. I ended up having to upgrade from a 1/2 ton to a 1 ton, or a 3/4 ton to a 1 ton. I did have a 3/4 ton in there at one point in time. And then we eventually sold the tractor, which was a great tractor. But I realized that a tractor loader backhoe was good at a lot of things. It wasn't great at anything. And so we got almost all of our money back out of the tractor, and we ended up buying a mini excavator. Now, had I not taken care of that tractor, there would have been no money for the mini excavator. So that's where a lot of what you see here on the channel and what I feel like, would help some folks out there. A lot of times people drive a vehicle, they buy one that's got high mileage on it or whatever the case may be, maybe needs some work. They drive it until it's completely clapped out and it's worth nothing. Or they buy a vehicle that inherently has engineered mechanical issues that are very expensive to fix when they go bad. Pardon me, they're very expensive. And so they drive it until something major happens, and then they lose all that investment. You make your money on the purchase of the vehicle up front. Make sure it's worth the purchase. I will tell you right now, the vehicles from about 2015 until now have more problems than the vehicles from 2015 to 2005. Transmission issues, engine issues, turbo issues, communication network issues. All of those are expensive words that I just put out there, and they're very difficult to fix, and they're very expensive. They go kind of hand in hand. So if you've got an older vehicle and you're thinking about, hey, getting a newer vehicle, great. Do your homework first. Do not run out and buy something. If you Google it here online, and again, look at multiple sources. Don't just look at the first person that puts a post out there or the first thing you see on Wikipedia. Some of these vehicles that have the most reliable JD, blah, 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 whatever, don't buy the first model year of a new anything. Usually wait to that 3rd to 5th year and do your homework a little bit. I have so many recalls coming into our software and our system all the time saying, hey, this vehicle, if it does this, it gets an engine. Hey, if this vehicle does this, it gets a transmission. Hey, if you're running down the road and it goes from 6th gear to 1st gear at highway speeds and locks up the rear differential, put this wiring harness in there. I wish I was making this stuff up. Do your homework. I'll be honest, a lot of what you would consider the big 3 domestics are not domestically made anymore, and they're doing a real poor job about it. I've talked about it a lot here with the status of Ram, Stellantis, Fiat. Dodge was an American company. And you look at the older models when Daimler Chrysler still owned them, those were pretty good rigs. And I would venture to say, and this is just an assumption of mine, if you were a Dodge person back in the day and you continued to stay with Dodge, even in the evolutions when Mercedes owned it, Fiat owned it, now Stellantis owns it, or merged with Fiat and Stellantis, you probably bought a Dodge because of your loyalty of growing up with a great product. And I've kind of bashed on Dodge over the years, but I have a much different appreciation for them now because of what they have become, or they have lost their roots, and they're no longer a domestic company. They're no longer built with that utility focused, where they were just a beast of a vehicle, fairly dependable, and even when something major went wrong, like a transmission, you could fix them relatively cheaply, pretty straightforward. The vehicles or the Rams of today, or the Stellantis products of today, the Jeep products of today, are not the same company that they were, that we all knew and loved through the 80s, 90s, even back into the 70s. I mean, they were a monster. Got off bird walking a little bit there, but my point being is, if you Google one of those products, you're like, oh, Stellantis or Dodge or Ram has got this great rebate, and Google the reliability of those vehicles. Google cost of ownership on some of those vehicles, and actually do your homework. And if you've got one of those out there and it's been a great vehicle for you, I'm super happy. But take care of it, because if you don't, it's going to leave you with a bucket of bolts that's not going to be a good situation. Even some of the struggles, and you guys know I'm a big Ford guy. When my mom was talking about buying a vehicle, we bought a very specific powertrain, very specific maintenance schedule and package for that thing, because I want her to be able to drive that the next 10, 20 years with little or no issue, with confidence as well. You look at some of the GM issues with the 6.2, the engine failures. Ford and Chevy both are tied into the transmission failures on some of their half-ton pickups, their front-wheel drive. Ford with their open cylinder head deck design. You really better do your homework. When somebody comes to see us or somebody contacts me directly, I'm very specific. And honestly, a lot of times they're like, well, what do I buy? I need to know what it is you're wanting to do with the vehicle, and I'll kind of steer you in that manner. Are you willing to go used and a little bit older and put some money into it? Or are you set on new and under warranty? That's at your discretion. Those are all important things. Me personally, I think about this often, like, what would I buy if I was going to buy something brand new? And a lot of times, Toyota and Honda are going to be at the top of the list. Kia and Hyundai are having still some engine issues. They're trying to work through some of that. Chevy's having engine and transmission. Ford, definitely transmission. Head gasket issues with Ford as well. We talked about Stellantis and Ram. I'm not a big European guy, so that's not going to be my area of expertise. Well, it is my area of expertise, but there's a reason I'm not a big European guy. You look at Nissan, they're having a lot of financial trouble, so that's not going to lead to high quality products that they're putting out for many years of dependability. I don't know, I'm probably forgetting some up in there, but that's kind of going to be where I'm going to go with it. So Honda and Toyota are probably going to be, for most folks out there, what I'm going to recommend. If you don't like or won't fit Honda or Toyota, we're probably going to have a little discussion, and I'm going to urge you to buy something, probably a little older, and put some money in it and get it up to par, because I think that's going to be a better outcome than buying something that's under warranty for 3 to 5 years. 3 to 5 years, back in the 2000s, they do like a 10-year, 100,000-mile bumper to bumper. Those have been gone for a long time. So 3 to 5 years isn't hanging out near like it used to, as well as the cost of repairs on those late model vehicles are so much higher than some of those vehicles that I talked about that are 10, 15 years old, but still really good options. A lot of creature comforts as well. And there's a lot of aftermarket companies that can help with some of the creature comforts that it doesn't have. So if you're in the market and looking at those, don't be impulsive like I was, like I said, on the F-150 and the skid steer. I have a lot of great deals out there where I've made some crazy good buys, but I've had to rehab them and love them a little bit. And if you are going to buy new, definitely do your homework. If you're going to buy used, I don't care whether you bring it to A1 Custom or your trusted mechanic, but you need to give it a good look over and detach your emotions from it. It needs to be a very rational decision that, hey, I'm buying this vehicle because it's rust-free, decent maintenance, not buying the vehicle because it looks great, but I raise it up and it's just rusted to death, or it's leaking to death, or it's got a turbo GDI forced induction with variable valve timing and a CVT transmission in it. Don't buy those technologies because they're not very good, okay? And you'll buy a lot of problems when you buy stuff with that kind of technology that they haven't really fixed yet. But we're right at a half hour. I'm trying to keep up with our podcast content. I love hearing from you guys down in the comments. If you made it this far in the video, big thank you to you guys. If there's topics you want me to talk about, throw it in the comments and I'll do my level best to do either a reply to you, and I do that a few times a week, so if it's a couple of days, just bear with me, or we'll do a full-blown video on it. Great to hang out with you guys. Hope you have an awesome week.